Hey everyone, welcome to Photo Blue, and today I'm going to show you how to use a histogram in Adobe Lightroom. Alright, so the histogram's up here in the corner of the screen. We have it on develop so that we can adjust the tones of this photograph. Now this photograph's a DNG, which is a raw format of photograph, so it actually has more information that we can extract from highlights and shadows than, say, a JPEG. A JPEG limits what the range is that's recorded on the film itself. But when you shoot a raw image, you actually have more of the information and the highlight and the detail so that you can kind of adjust it. It's almost like shooting the picture at home instead of shooting it out on location, because in a sense you can kind of re-expose the photograph and adjust it quite a bit more with a raw file. Alright, so anyway, we have something called a histogram up here, and the histogram shows us the levels of tones in a particular photograph. And you may have seen one of these not only on photographic programs, but also even on many cameras have the ability to show a histogram so that you can see what levels of light you're dealing with and if there are any potential problems. When we get all the way over here to the left, those are the blackest blacks that we can get. And what happens is at the blackest black, or at the whitest white, you have something called clipping, which means there's no information in it. It's so black or it's so white, there's no information left in it. There's no detail. So you want to kind of avoid that, but you also want the darkest black and the whitest white that you can get with detail in it a lot of times, depending on what you're shooting. So that's something to be aware of. So you can see over here to the right, this is the highlight detail, and there's a spike up here, which is probably reflecting this area right here, where it's very close. It's pretty much the whitest white you can get with detail. And if you look, there's a space here. Now if we go down here to highlights and adjust the highlights all the way up, you can see that spike goes, and it goes all the way over to the whitest whites and to the place where it starts to totally lose detail there. So we're going to put the highlights back to kind of the middle position. Now the same thing happens over here with the shadows, and if we go down here and move the shadow detail all the way over, you can see there's a block here, and it's totally blacked out here. Now what the histogram can do is, because it shows us this information, we have an idea of what areas are problematic, even though we probably do already looking at the image. But we can look at the way what our adjustments do affect this. And so the first thing we really want to do is we want to make sure we don't have blacks that have gone totally to black or whites that have gone totally to white. And so I'm going to come down here, and the first thing I'm going to do is go to the shadow detail right here, and we're going to bring this up. And if you look at the histogram up here, as I move this shadow range right here, it's moving over, and it's kind of flattening out a little bit. So there we've gotten to a level, looks pretty good there, and it's kind of evened things out. There's not such a spike over here. It's brought it in some. There's still a bunch of shadow detail and darker colors in here. And that's a better range probably for it. Now if you look over here, there's still this highlights a little bit high. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down the highlights a little bit. And this looks a little bit better right here, and it's darkened things up out in the sunlight a little bit more. And you can see how it just brought that peak right down right there. And so we can use this to kind of guide us and look at the image to see what we like in the highlights, in the shadow detail. And the histogram can help guide us and give us an idea of where things are in the range. It's almost like using, like if you play an instrument like a guitar and you have a guitar tuner, the guitar tuner will help you find where the thing is in tune, and it's kind of just like an instrument like that, or it's a it helps you find where maybe the ultimate area is. And particularly if you tend to get lost easily and you're wondering, am I moving it the right way or not, the histogram can kind of show if you're going in the right direction or whatever. So we've adjusted the highlights and the shadows. In a lot of photo programs there will be a histogram, and you can adjust the highlights and the shadows in them, and that's really probably one of the first things you should adjust, because that gets your upper and your lower range in there well. And then what you can do is you might want to tweak the exposure a little bit. Say we want just a slightly brighter, and so we've brought up the shadow detail a little more, and maybe we want to bring the highlights down after that. And so you can also see how that's adjusted the histogram, and look at the image, see if you like that. Maybe you want to bring the shadows down a little more now. And then also you can look at the contrast at this point and see if we go to the contrast back and forth at this. Now we can really adjust the contrast to where we want it, and it becomes easier. The problem becomes when you start to just move all of these controls around without some sort of strategy and without having a histogram, you might be crossing things out. So you want to get the highlights and the shadows first, and then go maybe tweak the exposure, then go back to the highlights and shadows, and then maybe you want to adjust the contrast just slightly to get the picture to where you want it. So all these things are tools that you can use, and the histogram can show you, it can be like a roadmap to you of where the things are and how to kind of set a strategy to go about adjusting the photograph to a better level of contrast, exposure, and shadows and highlights. This has been Photo Blue, and I'll see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like.